Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, I'm doing some French Farmhouse kitchen thrift flips. This video is part of the Thrift Flip Road Trip Challenge hosted by Unicorn Dust Designs, Indie Annie Jones and the Crafting Cousins. For my first project, I'm going to be giving this bread bin a makeover. My first step is to clean it, get rid of all that kitchen grime. And then once it's nice and clean, I'm going to take Paint Couture's Farmhouse linen and I'm going to give this piece 3 coats. Just a reminder to check out the Thrift Flip Road Trip Challenge playlist that is in my description below. Make sure you check out all of those other amazing creators' videos. So as you can see, I'm working my way around the bread bin, applying even coats of this beautiful chalk paint. However, I am not going to be painting the inside. I've only given it a good clean. It is in really good condition and I want to make sure that it remains food safe, so I don't want to go in there with any paint products that may jeopardize this. As I moved on to painting the little door of the bread bin, I had to be mindful not to let that paint build up too much, and I also had to make sure that I didn't get any paint in the little grooves that the door opens up along. I had to make sure that that was free of paint so that it didn't obstruct any movement of it opening and closing. Once my paint was dry, I took out IOD's new Mercantile stamp. This is a 2-page stamp design. There are so many gorgeous farmhouse style designs in this pack. We really are spoilt for choice, and of course they have the masks as well. This one has a grain sack stripe, so this is definitely a new fave. So I'm going to take the plastic off, and whenever you get a new set of IOD stamps, you do want to take a 220 grit sandpaper and give it a light scuff sand. You can see I'm just running my sandpaper one direction, then I'm flipping it around and going at the other direction. You only ever need to do this once in the life of your stamp. Next, I'm going to start organizing the design that I want. So I'm going to first of all pull off the beautiful big laurels that come in that pack, and I'm going to position them on the top of the bread bin. I've got a nice big work surface to work with there. So I'm just working out how much of the stamp's going to actually fit there, and then I'm also going to take the lettering that's on the inside. I actually really love the way they've got that laid out already, but I'm not going to use the crown. Once I'm happy with the layout, I'm actually going to take one of the plastic pieces that comes with the stamps and I'm going to lay that over the top of the design that I've laid out. This is going to act a bit like a thin mount. I'm then going to put that to one side and grab my tape measure, and I'm going to work out where the center of the top is, just so that I can be sure to center my stamped design. I'm just making little lead pencil lines. I'm then going to start adding my IOD permanent black ink over the top. You can see I'm just dabbing that on. I'm not pressing too hard, and I'm also being very careful to take notice of how my stamp is positioned. I don't want to put ink anywhere that I don't need it. So obviously we're going to have some of that design going off the edge there. Once I've worked that out, I did take a wet wipe and I'm going to wipe back some of the laurel design so that it doesn't go all the way to the end. And I'm going to be doing that on each side. So just keep this in mind, that you can pick and choose which parts of the stamp you're going to use and wipe back any of it that you don't want to use. I'm then going to flip the stamps over, position it in the center and press down. You'll see I always have one hand in place holding that stamp down while the other moves around and applies pressure. I'm just really using my nails to go over the top of the design. You don't want to press too hard. You might distort the image if you do that. And then once I feel like I have that all down properly, I'm going to lift it straight up. I then took out the other sheet of stamps that comes in that pack. I'm actually just going to trim off the grain stripe there because I'm going to use that on the front of the bread bin. I'm going to ink up part of it. I don't need the whole thing. It's not going to fill the entire front section. And obviously this is going to be a little bit distorted. I'm going to use the backing image that comes with your stamp to work out exactly how much of the stamp I'm going to need. I'm going to wipe off any excess ink that I don't need, and then once I'm happy with that, I'm going to position it on the bread bin in the center and press down. Now, as I said, this image is going to be a little bit distorted, a little bit disjointed because we have the gaps on that bread bin door. So I'm just pressing down, just getting the best contact that I can, but I don't mind that it's going to be broken up because we're going for a distressed look anyway. So once I'm happy with it, I will pull that away, and then you'll see here I've wiped away a bunch of the ink to give it a more faded vintage look. As I said, I'm going to be distressing anyway very soon. I then took another wet wipe and I'm going to pull back a little bit more of the ink from our top design. Again, I want this to look faded and worn and aged. Now, IOD ink is the only ink that I've tried doing this technique with. Make sure you test it out before you try this with any other type of ink. When my surface was dry, I took some 220 grit sandpaper and started going around the edges of my piece and doing some distressing. I don't want it overly distressed, but I definitely want to see hints of that wood underneath peeking through. And especially on that front bin door there, we're going to distress in the transition lines, just like I said I would, so it's not going to look so odd that we have gaps in that grain sack stripe design. I wiped off the sanding dust and then used Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in satin to seal my entire bread bin. If you're in Australia and you want to grab some of the new IOD spring release items, make sure you check out our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. I really want to give this bread bin more of an aged look, so I'm going to take Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze and I'm adding that over the top of the dry top coat. Because we've sealed it first, I'm going to be able to come back and wipe back as much or as little as I want. So I'm just using a wet wipe now to spread that product, but then I will start dabbing away at it to remove some of it. And again, we want this to look quite worn and old, and this glaze is definitely going to help achieve that. I really like to dab at the glaze because it creates little colored water bubbles, if that makes sense, which actually ends up looking like aged spots. On the front section of the bin, I'm applying that glaze and really working it into the crevices and just really trying to get into all those little nooks. And then obviously, just like we did on the top, I'm going to come back and wipe back some of it. After I finished with that section, I continued to add the glaze on the rest of the piece. Now, obviously, if this look is too grungy for you, you could definitely leave this step out. Once I finished adding the glaze in all the other sections, I actually decided that I wanted to add another layer of that glaze just to the bread bin door so that it almost looks like stained wood. I just really loved the two-tone look that this created. Next, I'm going to take these little wooden pieces that I thrifted. To me, they look like they would make perfect little feet. So I'm actually going to use that Van Dyke Brown Glaze as a stain. This can be used as a semi-gel stain. I'm adding it and then I'm using a wet wipe to blend it and wipe away the excess. When they were dry, I flipped the bread bin over and I'm going to start adding the feet using some Gorilla Super Glue gel. So I just position them in each of the four corners. I will then use some sandpaper to pull back that excess paint that's on the bottom and tidy it up. I then took Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic and I added 2 coats to the handle of the bread bin. I just felt like I wanted to bring in another color and just add a pop of shine. So I'm just going to add 2 coats. I'm going to let that dry, and then I used some more of that Van Dyke Brown Glaze and I just added that over the top to give the bronze a more vintage used look. And here's our finished bread bin. I love how this turned out. That beautiful new IOD stamp really took this project to a whole new level. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my next project, I'm going to be giving this little ceramic jug a makeover. The colors just were not to my taste. To prime the surface, I'm going to be using Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in grey. I'm applying it with a makeup sponge so that I don't get any brush strokes, and I'm just going to work my way around this piece, and I'm going to be applying 2 coats. I'll apply the first coat, let it dry for about an hour, and then add the second coat. When my second coat was dry, I took Paint Couture's Farmhouse linen, and I'm going to be applying that to the entire piece. Again, I'm using a makeup sponge. This gives a really lovely eggshell kind of a finish. It's definitely preferable to getting brush strokes, especially on a ceramic piece. So I'm going to continue to add this beautiful paint, and it did take 2.5 coats to get the coverage I wanted. In those trickier areas, I did switch to using a paintbrush. When my paint was dry, I took out IOD's Mercantile Stamp again, and I'm actually just going to be using the little cow from that design. I'm just going to ink up the head. That's what we're going to use for the moment, and I'm going to position that in the center of our jug and press down. Again, just really take your time here, especially when you're working on a curved surface. Once I'm happy with that, I will pull that away. I'm then going to be taking out IOD's new Apothecary Labels Stamp Pack. In this pack, you have 4 different sheets to choose from with lots of smaller fonts and also some beautiful frames. And we're going to be using one of those today. So I'm going to take out that beautiful floral oval frame, and I'm just going to peel that off. I've already done my sandpaper that I did at the start, gave it a bit of a scuff sand. I am then going to use my IOD permanent black ink on there, and now I'm just working out if I'm going to need to wipe back any areas, and there are a few that I'm going to just pull that ink back away from so we don't obscure the cow. Once I'm happy with it, I'll position that and press down. Once I pulled that design back, I then decided to get a wet wipe, and just like we did with the first project, I am going to wipe back some of that ink to give this more of a faded look. Obviously, if a vintage look is not what you're after, you could leave this step out. Next, I'm going to take my IOD ink pad, and I'm just going to dab that around the rim of the top section of our jug. And then I took a wet wipe, and just like we did on the front, I'm going to pull back some of that ink to give it a more faded look. When my ink was dry, I sealed the entire jug with Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in satin. You could definitely leave it at this point, but I like a vintage finish, so I took the wet wipe that I was using with the glaze in the first project. This has Van Dyke Brown glaze on it, and I'm just dabbing what's left on my wet wipe onto the jug. So this is going to be a very subtle look here, and then I did use a wet wipe to pull back any of the really intense parts. And here's our finished jug. I think this turned out really sweet, and I hope it's shown you that you can use bits and pieces of stamps to create a custom look. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For our final project today, I'm going to be giving this wooden board a makeover. I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Queen's Court mineral paint. I'm going to lay down 1 coat over the entire piece, let that dry, and then I'll come in with a second coat. Now this does have a built-in sealer, so I do not have to add any top coats to this at all. If I've inspired you to try any of these Paint Couture products, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put it in the description below and on the screen. I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. Once my 2 coats of Queen's Court mineral paint were completely dry, I took out IOD's Mercantile Stamp again, and we're going to be using this sweet chicken with the laurels around it. I'm going to peel off the laurel design first and position that on the board where I want it to go, and then also grab my chicken there in the center, and then I'm going to use the plastic sheet that comes with it, just like we did in the first project, and I'm going to press that down. And then once I'm happy with that, I'm I'm going to then be taking Paint Couture's Farmhouse linen. I'm going to put a little bit of that paint out on some cardboard, and then I'm using a brayer, and we are going to use this to then apply that chalk paint over the top of the stamp. Now you definitely need to go a bit heavier with the paint than you would if you were using ink. So I'm just going to go over the top of that, making sure that I have a nice coat there, and then when I'm happy with that, I'm going to position that where I want it to go and press down. Again, I'm going to have one hand holding the stamp in place at all times while the other hand moves around and applies pressure. Once the design was completely dry, I used Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin to seal over the top. Now this paint has a built-in sealer, but the chalk paint doesn't, so we need to add this top coat on to protect it. When the top coat was dry, I took Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze, and you guessed it, we're going to give this piece a vintage look. So I've applied some of the glaze. I'm going to use a wet wipe to spread it out, and then I'm going to start pulling some of that back and doing that dabbing motion again that I talked about before, so that we get some of those aged spots. And it just looks a little bit more realistic when you do that instead of just wiping it back. Once I was happy with the look, I then took the paintbrush and added a bit more of that glaze just around the edge. I really concentrated it there, and then I dabbed off some of the product, but not as much as we were doing before. And I'm going to repeat that process around the entire edge of our wooden board. When that was dry, I took some twine and cut that to the size that I wanted. I'm then going to fold it over 3 times to thicken it up, and I'm going to thread it through the hole up the top there and tie a knot so that if this needs to be hung on a hook, it can be. And here's our finished French style serving board. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. Those IOD stamps look beautiful with chalk paint as well as ink. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's video and that it's inspired you to use some of the new IOD stamps on your thrifted finds. Let me know if you had a favorite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. Remember to check out the Thrift Flip Road Trip Challenge playlist in the description below. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find most of the products used today, including the new IOD, on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.